Thank you again, everyone, for carving out time. It's lovely to see you all here from different parts of the world. I'm going to hand it over to Maimoona, the CEO and founder of Teach for Bangladesh, who is going to take us through this incredible journey.
Thank you so much, Ankana, and welcome everyone to our session entitled Community-Rooted Policy, a Conversation with Government Leaders about Co-Imagining the Future of Education. My name is Maimoona. I'm the CEO of Teach for Bangladesh. And I just really appreciate everyone who's taken the time to join us, both here on Zoom as well as on the Facebook live stream. Really want to take a moment to appreciate Teach for All for organizing what has been a very inspiring global conference that's been taking place over the last 3 days and bringing together our very special community from all over the world. It is really my pleasure and honor to be hosting today's panel discussion on behalf of Next Gen Edu. Next Gen Edu is a platform created by a coalition of public and private organizations that came together initially in Bangladesh, but then spread globally in the wake of the school closures caused by COVID-19. The objective of the initiative is to create safe spaces for different actors in education to come together, build safe and trusting relationships with one another, exchange ideas, collaborate, and expand their impact. Next Gen Edu will be organizing several follow-up sessions to this one over the next few weeks, and all the participants to today's session are invited to join and stay connected with Next Gen Edu. If you are interested in learning more about this platform and staying connected for future events, we will be sharing a link to a Google form that you can fill out in the chat, both now and again at the end of this session. So just fill that form out and then we will put you on our mailing list. Today's discussion focuses on a topic that is very close to my heart as a former educator myself. And the topic is the role of students, parents, teachers, and community members in informing the education policies that affect them. And to discuss this topic, we have convened a panel of extremely distinguished public officials from across South and Southeast Asia. We will hear from them about the future that they envision for education in their countries and the role that they see communities can play in helping shape that future. I'm really grateful that they have taken the time out of their very busy schedules to share their experience and their insights on this very important topic with us, and just feel really, really fortunate to be sharing this virtual stage with them. So let me begin by introducing our panelists to you. We have the Honorable Education Commissioner of the state of Maharashtra, India, Mr. Vishal Solanki with us. Thank you, sir, for being here. We have the Honorable Director General of Teachers and Education Personnel at the Ministry of Education and Culture of Indonesia, Dr. Iwan Shahril. Thank you so much for being here. We have the Honorable Former Minister of Education of Bhutan, Professor Thakur Singh Paudel. Thank you so much for being here and making the time to join us. And of course, it's a very special honor for me, particularly as a Bangladeshi, to have with us the Honorable Minister of Education for Bangladesh, Dr. Dipu Moni. Thank you for being here and a warm welcome to all of you. After the initial discussion, which I will be moderating, we will be taking questions from the audience. And so as we go along, please feel free to type in any questions that come to your mind, either for specific panelists or for the panel in general. We will be collecting those questions and we will try to get to as many as possible by the end of this session. And so without further ado, let me kick us off. Because we have such a diverse representation from across South and Southeast Asia here today, I wanted to start by asking each of our panelists to give us a brief glimpse of what is happening in the education system in your country right now, especially given the disruptions that have been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's begin with Dr. Dipu Moni, if you can kick us off and give us a brief picture of what's happening in the Bangladesh education system right now.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this event. In recent years, you know that Bangladesh has made great strides in education sector, achieving nearly 100% enrollment and gender parity in primary education, and also reducing dropouts throughout the system. We know that disruption in schooling can have severe consequences for our learners. If we don't act, COVID-19 could undo some of our progress that we have achieved so far. But we're acting, and we have been adapting ourselves with this new normal situation as fast as possible. We started, that we only after 12 days of the announcement of school closures throughout the country, we started our online television, television classes, distance learning classes through a dedicated television channel. That is our Shamshud television. And we also started a little later online classes. Our teachers, they showed tremendous resilience, and they coped up with the new teaching and learning methods. They started with their minimum knowledge, because at the beginning, they were not used to these methods. And they started with their minimum knowledge and skill about e-classes. But in the last few months, their progress in this area is significant. Now some of them are even capable of giving online tests to their students. In Bangladesh, we understood this immediately and have moved fast to ensure that the children across the country, they don't fall through the cracks during school closures. We have transitioned to digital education using a hybrid analog digital approach. We introduced television-based learning over our state broadcaster, Shamshud Television, as I just said. And we also know that we're not able to reach everyone. And we have done several surveys. One survey was done by our Directorate of Secondary and Higher Education, which calculated the number of students number of learners who are accessing these classes. And also there was another study done by an NGO, and they have also come up with some numbers. However, from these studies and the data that we get from across the country, we infer that the percentage of the out-of-reach students is not more than 15 to 20%. For these 15 to 20% students, we have already taken some measures. We have instructed our teachers to have close contact with these students through mobile phones, and they're doing it. Most importantly, they're trying to facilitate these students' learning by providing with necessary guidelines. We're also broadcasting lessons on Facebook Live and national radio, and support teachers' continuous professional development and student learning over online portals with freely accessible learning content. E-learning at every level is the direction we were already taking even before the COVID-19 started. We were moving in that direction. But COVID has expedited this process of building an ecosystem for e-learning that is accessible for our learners in Bangladesh. We also had to decide on alternative methods of assessment for secondary and higher secondary level students. And we have readjusted our curriculum so that learners can be promoted to their next classes without exams, but after acquiring the minimum level of competence that they're supposed to learn to equip them for their next year of education. Our tertiary level students, however, they are continuing their education through online classes, and we know that some students there also were facing problems accessing these classes because of lack of device or lack of internet connection. So in most cases, universities themselves have assisted students with financial support who needed for procuring devices and having internet access. So it's a multi-pronged kind of approach that we have taken, and our teachers, I must commend our teachers. They have shown tremendous tenacity, and they have been very innovative, very supportive, and they have shown a lot of courage. And because of that, and I think also support from families, parents, we are now able to carry the education through even during this COVID crisis. But as all, I mean, whenever there is a crisis, it also comes up with opportunities. It creates opportunities, and I think for us who are at the helm, who are at the policy making level, we must identify these opportunities and try to utilize them fully. And we are just trying to do that in Bangladesh. And as I said, we were already moving into the direction of blended education, but now we have brought it forward, the whole efforts. And so now the ecosystem is already there for that blended education. So when we open our institutions after the post-COVID situation, we will have the transition to blended education will be, I think, very smooth because people have already become very used to this idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I think you're right that it's the courage of teachers and parents and the very quick action that the government of Bangladesh took that has enabled children to keep learning during this time of disruption. So thank you. Next, I want to hear from Education Commissioner Vishal Solanki. Sir, would you tell us a little bit about what's happening in the state of Maharashtra? I believe you're on mute. You may need to unmute the mic.
Yeah, thank you, Mamuna. I hope I'm audible. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
And first of all, let me congratulate Teach for All and the organizers for organizing this conference and helping all of us to share our views and best practices in different countries. So all of us are having this turbulent year 2020 where COVID had impacted almost every country on the planet. And including India, I represent Maharashtra, which is one of the 30 states in India. And having population of almost 120 million, it's almost 10% of the country, and around 23 million children study in the primary and secondary grades here who had been impacted due to COVID lockdown. To give a glimpse of what had happened in the last 6 months, the academic year was about to close when COVID pandemic had started in the country. And since then, the schools have been shut, and the government across different states are yet to consider school reopening because of reports of reinfections and increasing spread of COVID once school reopens. So we are taking a very calibrated approach during this period. No doubt the academic achievements of children have been impacted, but the priority of the government had been to ensure their mental and physical well-being, which had been given the utmost priority, and followed by their social and emotional health. So these had been the priority apart from the foundational and numeracy, the literacy and numeracy, which are important. So the governments here had tried different ways, online as well as offline. Around 30% of children have online access to Google Classrooms and different types of online sessions, YouTube, and so on. But if you look at majority of students, they would have access to TV, televisions, radio, and a few other means through which lessons had been imparted, stories had been told, and numerous other activities had been given to children to keep them engaged. So the idea was engaging them in initial 2 to 3 months so that they retain their interest in learning and then slowly build up on the learning outcomes. But there were around 20% of children who were from socioeconomically very weaker backgrounds, had absolutely no access to any kind of gadgets, including online or offline, or any kind of access. So our teachers had voluntarily went to their hamlets, their habitations in remote parts of the country and so on, and tried to impart education. Of course, it was very difficult to reach each and every child, but almost 10 to 15% of such children had been reached. So we are left with another 5% of children who absolutely still have no access to any kind of education. And that's the biggest challenge that we face, and we are trying to find out solutions. During this period, all the textbooks, activity books had been delivered to their homes so that children can engage in self-study and try to cope up with the syllabus. The governments also have reduced the curriculum in this particular academic year and plans to bridge the gap in next academic year. So we are looking at continuous and comprehensive evaluation over 2 academic years, so that children who have missed out on important academic inputs would cover it up in the next academic year. So on multiple fronts, we are still coping up with different challenges, but hope that in these trying circumstances, we try to do our best for the children.
Thank you very much. Again, we're hearing a similar theme of how do we really address equity and make sure to reach especially the most marginalized children during this pandemic. Thank you for sharing your experience. Let's now go to the former Minister of Bhutan, Professor Thakur Singh Paudel. Sir, tell us a little bit about what's happening in Bhutan.
Thank you very much indeed for letting me join this very lively conversation. I would also like to greet the Honorable Minister, Her Excellency, Dr. Deepamani, who had the joy of meeting in Sri Lanka and also at the airport in Bangladesh, Dhaka, and all of you in the panel, and to everybody who has been, in fact, sharing this space today from around the world. I would like to say what a great joy it is for me to participate with all of you. I've spent all my working life with young people, children, boys and girls, and my fellow teachers. And it feels like a festival today, being able to share the stage virtually with all of you. And I would also like to commend all of you, my fellow educators all around the world, and the organizers in Bangladesh for mounting this extremely important forum for all of us to share ideas, dream the future together, and also hope for the pandemic to end soon and that we'll be able to return to our normal activities of living our lives and teaching our children what they ought to be learning. In Bhutan, of course, as secure as we thought we were, nestled up in the lap of the mountains. However, the first case of the virus came with the visitor to Bhutan on the 5th of March. And soon after, as soon as the winter break was over and the schools started, within a matter of a couple of days, the schools had to be closed down because we had to take precaution. And for the last several months, the schools have actually remained closed. In the recent months, we have started classes for standard 10 and 12 students because they take the final board examinations. And the college students have also returned to their classes, but we offer a hybrid kind of teaching. There are some in-person classes and others are online. However, for students in the other classes from pre-primary up to standard 9, as well as for standard 11, we still have online teaching. The Ministry of Education has prepared what is called an Education in Emergency program. And under the auspices of this program, the system, the Department of Education, the district administrations, the school administrations have actually been providing a kind of tailor-made program for all the students across the country. Our teachers have been doing an extremely commendable job, both trying to provide online teaching, and in cases where students are not able to access the tools of learning, online learning. Our teachers travel to individual homes of students and provide teaching to those students who are actually at a disadvantage compared to those who are in better off areas. And at this point in time, what we feel is that even though the schools are closed, learning is happening, teaching is happening. When I was in the Ministry of Education, we had actually designed a program called with the theme, every village a school and every home a classroom. That's what is actually happening in real terms now. We feel that even though there may be no formal classes for many of the students who are not able to attend in-person classes, but quite a lot of learning is happening at home. And this is one moment where parents have become teachers, and students have actually also been teaching their parents, their siblings, some of the literacy, in fact, learning and communication skills. So this is what is happening at the moment in Bhutan. We hope that we'll be able to return to normal classes in the next academic session. As far as the final year students are concerned, the ministry has postponed their examinations from November this year to March next year, so that there is more time for teaching and learning for the students. So there is a kind of a multi-pronged approach to teach the students. In Bhutan, we take education extremely seriously, and as small as the population is, we feel that we have to reach out to every child. In terms of our gains, because of our size, both in terms of geography as well as in population, we have been able to reach out to every child in the school. We have been able to meet the Millennium Development Goals for education. Goal number 2 having to do with the universal primary enrollment. Goal number 3 having to do with the gender parity. We have been able to reach both those goals, as well as the constitutional mandate, which requires that every child who completes year 6 has to be admitted to school and complete basic education. That is 10 years of schooling, plus 1 year of pre-primary education. So on the whole, even though this is not the best arrangement, however, we feel that given this all-out approach by our education ministry, by the teachers, district administrations, we have been able to do as well a job as the pandemic situation allows. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very informative glimpse of what's happening in Bhutan. Every village a school, every home a classroom. I think that puts it perfectly as to what we're all having to figure out in our own contexts. Let me turn to Dr. Iwan Shahril from Indonesia. Please tell us a little bit about what's happening in your home country.
Thank you so much, Maimuna, and thank you so much for having me in such a very distinguished panelists and teacher for all conference. So the Indonesian story, like dealing with COVID, we just actually started, like the current minister, the new cabinet started like last year, like exactly 1 year from now, October 2019. So when COVID hit, it's like 6 months when we just already planning many things and suddenly it was disrupted. We were thinking about like planning about ambitious transformation, educational agenda, improving access, quality and equity, moving the orientation from content-based to basic competency, focusing on literacy, numeracy, and character, and technology as the enabler for this transformation. And when COVID happens, I think it's baby steps for everyone. I think everywhere we can see that nations, schools, teachers are struggling to juggle, to balance between health and safety, and ensuring some learning is still happening rather than no learning at all. So the basic principle in Indonesia for approaching like how to mitigate the situation is 2 things. Principle number 1 is this healthy and the health and safety of all the students, the teachers, and the families are the most important priority. And the second one is how to ensure that the students' growth and their psychological condition is still like being addressed in the very limited situation. Of course, there are a lot of challenges that we're facing, both by teachers, parents, and students during this pandemic in terms of learning. For instance, like teachers, like how to teach like using distance learning in a very weird situation, very strange, never imagined before, and still like have the urge to cover the curriculum. And then the problem of the student-teacher interaction that has reduced significantly. And then also the difficulty to communicate with parents as the new strategic partner for teachers to teach, because suddenly teachers and the ecosystem of learning is not only like the teachers and the student in the classroom, but suddenly it's expanded to home. So how to communicate with the parents is like another puzzle that teachers need to deal with. And for parents to accompany their kids during the learning is also not easy, because they also need to work. They have a lot of other responsibilities, and some of the parents also struggle to understand the lessons of their children, because it's different than before, and so on and so forth. And for the students, they find difficulty in concentrate to study from home, because it's not like the learning environment is different. And with the teacher's tendency to cover all the elements to the curriculum, and the students felt the overwhelmed assignment suddenly given by the teachers, because that's the only thing that the teachers can do to interact with the students by giving assignments. So this also contribute to the stress level and the psychological impact for the students. And one way that we dealt with this was we launched like the emergency curriculum. So then reducing simplifies just the core elements of the curriculum that teachers need to cover. So then as to help teachers to simplify their teaching, and also for parents, and we create modules also for parents, especially for the basic education, and then for students. So then they can with the teachers can simplify, so that the students also get some impact of that. We also launched like the television programs. This is similar to other countries in Bangladesh and Bhutan. Radio, and also collaboration with the educational technology companies is to provide like content for, especially for students that can access through the internet. But most importantly is like to support like the teachers, because the teachers they need support. So we create like a number of initiatives, like for instance, like using like the like teacher to teacher movement, using crowdsourcing model. One month after COVID was announced as the global pandemic, we launched this online platform where teachers can share lesson ideas, articles that they use in teaching and learning, either using blended or online, or some regions still do face-to-face for all levels, from early childhood to secondary level. And then for every subject, teachers share lesson plan and ideas. They can share, they can download. And I think this has created like a movement for many teachers. They also collaborate for professional development. So share ideas with each other, teach each other about what they do in their regions, because Indonesia has like 17,000 islands. So it's quite like spread out. So a lot of variations. So it cannot be from just top down. It needs to be like from teachers with other teachers, share ideas that are relevant in their context, because there are a lot of contextual variations. And we also provide like this is also striking, that the enthusiasm from teachers to learn. I think I've never seen like the movement for teachers to learn at this level. It's really great to see. Just like recently we launched program to support teachers in implementing the emergency curriculum. In about 10 days, 100,000 teachers are without a volunteer to join this platform to learn about how to implement the emergency curriculum. This is a different culture because teachers volunteer to participate instead of being instructed that they have to learn because it's a new curriculum. So it's like some very like from the other panelists also mentioned, encouraging signs of like a new mindset that has been adopted from sharing, from the enthusiasm for learning. And I think we should carry this forward. Also, the government also have to juggle with because the safety and health is like very important. That's the very basic principle. Like how to decide school reopening or not reopening. So we have like 4 zones from red, orange, yellow, and green. The safest ones are of course like the green and the yellow. And the ones that schools cannot be open is in the red and orange zone. So, but of course the number of like COVID cases, the status of this very fluctuate. So this also creates another dynamic in how we have to make sense of what's happening and adjust our strategy accordingly. We also launched the internet quota support for teachers and for students. So like free quota every month for teachers and students. From early childhood, it's 20 gigabytes per month. For basic and secondary education, 35 gigabytes per month. And then for the teachers, 42 gigabytes per month. And then for higher education, 50 gigabytes per month. And for the next until December. So we reallocated also the budget to support, especially the online learning that is getting more and more for both the teachers and the students, which we think that will be very, very helpful, especially in making sure the operational of teaching and learning, and also the learning, independent learning for both the teachers and the students can happen during these difficult times.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharhil. I think it's striking me as I'm hearing all 4 of you speak, some of the very interesting similarities as well as differences across the region. And one of the themes that I'm hearing from all 4 of you is that although there are some major challenges and disruptions that have been caused by COVID, there's also been a really great opportunity for innovation, for collaboration, for families and teachers to connect in a way that they had not before, which is quite exciting. So now that we kind of have a picture of what is happening in the current reality, I want to zoom out of the COVID world for a moment. And I want to ask each of you my favorite question to ask anyone in education, which is, if you could have anything, if you had blue sky and any dream that you want could come true, what is it that you would want most for the children of your country? And I was interested, Dr. Sharhil, when you were speaking, you mentioned that before COVID, your ministry was focusing on, building plans, focusing on literacy, numeracy, and character, I think I heard you say. So tell us more about that vision that you have for children in Indonesia. And if I may, as you answer, if you could also give us a glimpse as to how did you form that dream? Where did that dream come from?
Okay, thank you. I think the inspiration of the current transformation at the moment comes from our own father of education, Ki Hajar Dewantara. Let me give you one of his analogy and to answer this question. Each child is unique, right? Every educator, good educator knows this and holds true to this, right? So if a teacher gets this, we have if we are like a farmer, right? So we are a farmer and we're given seeds and we have different seeds. So the role of the education is to make sure if this is the paddy seed, the rice paddy seed, grow it as the best paddy that it can be. If it is a coffee seed, grow it as the best coffee that it can be. If it is a corn seed, grow it as the best corn that it can be. So in other words, what we want to see with our children, our country, is for them to really grow like who they are, follow their passion. And of course, the key word to me is happy, right? Happy here is not just happy, like well-being, right? So like the idea of the well-being, and they live a meaningful life, a life that there is a purpose, and I think if we put like in a framework, then the sustainable development goals is there, right? So where there's no hunger, right? No poverty, gender equality, clean energy, peace, and basically very good quality, but it's meaningful for them. So, and I think this is where education should provide opportunities for student voices and choices, right? And this is easier said than done, because that means that if you're the farmer, if you're the teacher, then you need to have like the knowledge and the skills to make sense of what seeds that you get, right? And then after that, grow it the best that it can be. And the next year, you cannot order, because each child is unique. So even though you have mastered some of the skills, next year you have a bunch of kids coming to your classroom, another time restart again, you relearn again, and then you have to make sense of the new seeds that you get. And every time it's always like that. So the consequence of that is, I think we need to have like a learning mindset, right? Disposition. What Alvin Toffler famously said, it's the century of we have to learn, unlearn, and relearn all the time. So.
Beautiful. I love that. Grow the best paddy seed, grow the best coffee seed, and really thinking about what we want for children in the context of a meaningful life. I think that's beautiful. And I can tell your passion for it because your face is lit up as you're speaking about the vision that you have for children. So thank you for that. I want to go back to former Minister Paudel for a minute, because in addition to being a public official, so you have been an author and an educator, and I personally was very inspired by what you have written around your green school model. Tell us, what is your vision for students in Bhutan and around the world?
Thank you very much again, indeed. For me, education is an extremely important human endeavor. I perhaps maybe the last person standing who believes in education as the noble sector. No other sector of public service has ever been called the noble sector, not even health. But some wise people in the past called education the noble sector. They must have had a very good reason for calling education the noble sector. Education is supposed to be an instrument to help young people, boys and girls, young men and women, cultivate the nobility of their mind, cultivate the nobility of their heart, thereby leading to the cultivation of action. So children exposed to an educational experience where they're able to cultivate the nobility of the head, the heart, and the hands will certainly graduate from an institution of learning. And when they join the larger society, they will also make that society that much better and that much nobler. If all the societies in all the nations become that much more noble, we will have a world that is also noble. So my dream is that of a green school in which we have an approach not only that helps sharpen brains and skills, but also builds faith and character. Education as a process that guides young people to look for and to love what is true and good and beautiful. So it is actually approaching the totality of the child, the totality of the person, and not only focusing on one claim. Today, all around the world, there's so much going on in the name of education, but not all of it has anything to do with education. At best, today's education responds to the claim of the mind or the intellect. But we human beings have so many other elements that make us who we are. And the children are various. They have multiple elements, multiple dimensions that make them who they are. And we do not respond to these multiple dimensions of children's lives. So I believe that we owe it to our children and we owe it to our societies. We owe it to humanity and to the world to respond to the multiple claims that make our children who they are, but that make life what it is, that make societies what it is. So my own dream of education, both in Bhutan as well as in the world, is one that is shaped by a green school. And a green school is green. Green is a color, but more than a color, it is a metaphor. Green is a metaphor for anything and everything that supports and sustains life, and life in its multiple variety: human life, animal life, plant life, bird life, life everywhere in the sea, on land, in the sky, and everywhere in between. So anything and everything that supports life and sustains life in its infinite variety is green. So we can have a green school, we can have a green home, green economy, green politics, green parliament, green legislation, green diplomacy, green business, green architecture, anything that supports life and living. So for me, education is a celebration of life. I believe in the sanctity and the integrity of life. So the first principle of education must be the preservation of the sanctity of life. So that is why in the COVID times, what is most important is securing the sanctity and uniqueness of life, human life in particular, but life in all its multiple forms. So my own dream of education is one that is shaped by the vision of a green school.
Thank you so much. That was very inspiring. And I think that this is certainly one venue in which you will find many people who agree with you that education and teaching is the noble sector. So we're very pleased to have you with us. If I can ask a follow-up question to that, I would like to know how has the culture or the history of Bhutan influenced the green school model for you? And I'm curious, in your many years as an educator, has speaking to students or parents or teachers changed your thinking around this at all? Since the topic of today's conversation is the voice of students and teachers and community members, have those voices shaped or influenced your thinking around the green school model?
I'm so glad that the theme of today's discussion is community-rooted policy. When we make policy, whose claims do we address? Whose claims? Is it the claim of the community, the claim of students, children, the claim of teachers, the claim of the society, the claim of the environment, claim of Mother Nature? Is it the claim of the sky, the earth, and the sea? Is it the claim of God? Is it the claim of politics? Is it the claim of market? Whose claim do we address in our schools, colleges, universities, in any place of learning? I believe when we make policies, it's extremely, extremely important to be sensitive of the claims that we need to address. Then only education becomes purposeful, it becomes directed, it becomes meaningful. In Bhutan, we believe that every nation ought to have its own North Star, just as indeed every man, woman, and child ought to have their own dream. So for Bhutan, the North Star was identified by His Majesty, the fourth King, Dugyalpo Jigme Singye Wangchuk, who we honor as the King of Destinies. His Majesty was very young when he became king, 16 going on 17. So even though he was very young in body, but in his thinking and vision, he was very mature. And he thought that Bhutan's development policy has got to be dictated not by the conventional GDP model, but by an alternative development model that he called gross national happiness. So gross national happiness as a development vision has been our North Star for now many decades. And if a nation has a North Star, the subsystems of that nation have to understand and embrace and advance that North Star. And education is an extremely important subsystem of any nation, because in our education system, in our schools, colleges, and universities, we have our future leaders, our policymakers, our bureaucrats, our leaders. So they have to understand and participate in the vision of the nation. So we have actually a whole nation approach. My green school, as well as our education policy, derives its inspiration, its life force from that national vision of gross national happiness. And we have approached the whole system. We have trained all our educational leaders. And in Bhutan, when you're talking about educational leaders and institutions, on the whole, we're looking at about 600 institutions from pre-primary through to the university, about 200,000 students in total. So which means our size is fairly manageable that way. So we have approached everybody. In fact, all the teachers have been involved, the policymakers have been involved, the community has been involved through what we call the non-formal and continuing education program. And today, because of social media, access to information and influence on policymaking is possible even by a child who is in the primary school or in a community school in a remote village. So in a way, it is a whole nation approach. And we feel that it is important to address and honor the claims of all the stakeholders in an important educational initiative that has wide implications on the whole system and the population. Thank you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I think it's such a powerful reminder when you share this example of the King of Bhutan as a 16 or 17-year-old being so forward thinking. I think oftentimes we forget the wisdom that young people have and how much there is to learn from the leadership of young people. So thank you for that powerful example and really inspiring to hear how children and stakeholders across Bhutan are being able to contribute to policy in the country. Let me turn to the Honorable Minister from Bangladesh, Dr. Dipu Moni. Would you share with us a little bit of your vision for the children in Bangladesh? What is most important to you, and how has that view been formed?
The future that I want is one in which our children, they have an education that would allow them to develop holistically and reach their full potential. And what kind of a life they must have? They must be happy persons, and obviously they will need to have skills and the right kind of mindset. But they must be responsible world citizens and who will be living in harmony and peace. So if you look at all these factors, then how do we develop them as such a person through our education system? If we just think that only our schools are going to do this job, then I think we will not be doing justice. Because how much do actually children learn from school? It's only a part. And they learn so much from their environment, from their families, from the communities. So enabling them to engage very positively within the family, within the community, and having developing a sense of belonging in them, and the values. They must learn the values of honesty and integrity, empathy, compassion, all these things. These are so important. And I mean, I would say as important as being a skilled person. So we definitely want our children to have knowledge, want them to have skills, want them to have the right kind of attitude. But overall, they must be become good human beings who can live a happy life. So they must be aware about their own history, about their own culture. They must be able to not just take pride in their own history and culture, but also be very open to all the other cultures in the world, and revel in the diversity that the humanity has to offer. And so we don't want them to be very inward looking. And that's why I'm saying they must become world citizens. And to become world citizens, they must know themselves, their own culture, their own language. And we have such a rich history and heritage. And our culture is also so rich. Our language, it's so dynamic and so rich. So in order to give them better understanding of who we are and the kind of difficulties that our people face all the time, the challenges, and at the same time, the kind of resilience and innovation that we see in our people, in our ordinary people, people who are surviving all these calamities, whether it's the natural calamities or other kinds, and still they're smiling, and they're dreaming to have a better life, and they're contributing so much to the country, to the world. So I wish that our children would learn all this and become a good person, and with empathy, with compassion, and they would love the life, and they would build a life that they would love. So it cannot happen in a situation or in an environment where they feel that the education is burdensome. There are exams, and there are so many books to read, or learning by rote. I mean, so all these things, these are burdensome, and they take away the happiness of learning, the joy of learning. So I would say that I would like to see that our children are able to develop in an environment where it's a very supportive environment. It's not an environment where they're not encouraged to ask questions. In fact, the opposite is there, that they're encouraged to ask questions, and people are there to provide answers to them, and encourage them to do things, learn by doing things, and continue to learn. And so learning to learn, that is so important now, because in this, the world is changing and at such a great speed. So whatever we are learning today may not be very relevant in the very near future. So what do you do then? You cannot come back to your campus every few years to learn new things, unlearn the things that you have learned. So if you learn how to learn, then it can be lifelong learning. And also we're changing in the whole education system, not just the curriculum, but the assessment method. And we are also going for, we're emphasizing on technical and vocational education, so that children, after they think that, okay, I have reached a certain stage, I need to get a job. It's not just that job seeking kind of attitude. They must feel that they can do things on their own. They can become entrepreneurs. They can do things in the social sector. They can innovate. They can do great things. They must be able to dream, and dream big. And that must be encouraged. So a very supportive environment, a very happy environment. I know that it's very easy to say all these things, but very difficult to enable such an environment. But definitely, I do dream of an environment like that.
Well, Dr. Deepawani, I'm going to, before I let you go, I am going to follow up on that last point. You've laid across this beautiful, inspiring vision, children knowing themselves, reveling in diversity. I love that. It's beautiful. You've talked about the importance of well-being and happiness. But you've also talked about the exam-centric culture that we have, how some of the existing practices and mindsets might be in contradiction to this vision that you've laid out. And I'm curious, in your experience as a leader, as a policymaker, what is the best way to build consensus, both within the government as well as within the community? Because in many cases, we also have parents who want their children to sit for exams and get results based on this very traditional system of thinking about progress. So what are the best practices there?
Well, I think through this COVID, as I said, that all crises come with some opportunities as well, and possibilities. So this COVID, I think, has opened up a lot of doors also for us. And the fact that this sort of homeschooling is going on, because they are learning from home, and so parents are in many ways involved. And if we can sustain this and make them and keep this engagement going, and also from all sides, from our side, from the policymakers' side, from the government side, from the teachers' side, and also from the community and the parent side, if there is positive engagement on these issues, because you see, what is at the core? We all want, all sides, we all want our children to have a better future. We all want our children's well-being. That is at the core. So if that is at the core, then I think if we agree on our goal, then if there is positive engagement, and if we can show some, at least some evidence-based practices, then through constructive engagement and constant engagement, changing mindset, yes, it takes time. This is probably the biggest barrier, mindset. And we have seen that when we started the online education. We saw that at the beginning, teachers, some teachers at some levels, not at the school levels, but even, I mean, at the tertiary level, we saw some teachers were very averse to this idea. But now they have become very comfortable. So changing the mindset, sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but through constructive engagement amongst all the stakeholders, I think we can do wonders, and that is what we need to do. And there are enough best practices, not just some in the country and some around the globe. And right. We can, and now, I mean, we are all part of a global village. So something happening in some other country is not something alien to us anymore. We are so right. exposed to the world. So I think best practices do not have to be from my own country or from my own culture. Now parents through social media, they are also exposed to so much. So I think it is going to be not so difficult to sure. change the mindset. And I think because at the core lies our desire for the well-being of the children. So I think we definitely can achieve that through constructive engagement amongst all the stakeholders.
Thank you. I want to turn to Education Commissioner Vishal Solanki, and then we've been collecting questions from the audience, so please keep them coming because that will be next. Commissioner, tell us about your vision for children in India. And I'm particularly curious, I know that you have played an important role in helping shape the new national education policy in India. And I'm curious, have the dreams and aspirations of children and community members in India been reflected in the new national education policy? And how did you connect those dots?
Yeah, first of all, it was very nice to hear from all the distinguished co-panelists about their vision for the children in their countries and across the world. So all of us, including the audience, have a consensus that the kind of humanity that we would like to bring about in next 10, 20 years through our education shares the same values of empathy, compassion, green living, and so on. So I feel the challenge is how do we really get it done? Because the moment a child steps out of his schools and universities into the real world, he sees a totally different world with different values. For succeeding materially, he compromises on his value system. We see so much difference between what exactly is being taught in our schools and what actually he experiences in the world outside. So how do we really make our children very powerful agents of change, believing in themselves and standing up to their own values and character, which have been imbibed in their schools? So that particular challenge, and to build that kind of resilience, I think we have to really give a deep thought to it. And same thought had been given in national education policy. If you look at, I think the audience is from across the globe, and it would be good if they Google it and download this 60-page document of national education policy, where almost more than 5 lakh villages and almost 30 state governments have contributed over 6 years. It was a mammoth exercise where almost 5 lakh suggestions came. And finally, the entire exercise had been condensed into this policy, and which actually shares and talks about all the values that we are all speaking about. So this policy is trying to really build about that kind of holistic development in children, psychologically, in terms of character, in terms of their outlook and vision for life, and at the same time skilling them, making them ready for the 21st century world, building all those 21st century skills that we talk about, and ensuring that they become global citizens. So there is talk about global citizenship curriculum, there is talk about entrepreneurship curriculum, and so on. So each and every facet of a child's life is being taken care of in that policy. But it's easier to make the best policies in the world, but the test of pudding lies in eating. And how do we really get it translated on ground, where we have almost millions and millions of children who are deprived of even basic foundational literacy and numeracy? They are deprived of basic skilling, deprived of basic access to education. So the challenge is huge. And that's where governments and NGOs like Teach for India or Teach for Bangladesh or Teach for, in different countries, we have such organizations, civil society, parents, and so many stakeholders have to come together. And for that, we really need to make health and education and these social sectors as priority. Generally, most of the national governments or state governments have different agenda. The priorities are different. 5 years down the line, you have to win an election, few years down the line, and so your agenda is set for national security and so many other things, not education or health, because the results would come a decade or 2 or 3 later. So the political leadership in every country probably will have to make health or education as a priority. And that's where the public opinion has to articulate this priority and impress upon the respective governments. We recently had one state government winning an election only on issue of development in health and education. So I think that's how, if we can ensure that there is huge awareness amongst people and they impress and pressurize government to make sure that our children get right kind of education, and when they come out of their schools, the world outside is not really different, where it punishes honesty and rewards either incompetence or corruption and so on. So it's a huge challenge, easier said than done, but we have to make a small beginning in our schools.
Thank you so much. We have questions pouring in from the audience. In addition to the 100 people who are in this Zoom room, we have around 500 people who are watching from Facebook. A question from Catherine Pitcher, who is a Teach for All alum, currently studying international education policy at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. is that there has been remarkable innovation in education in the last 7 months, maybe more than the last 7 years. How can we harness this energy for innovation and maintain it moving forward so that we can continue to serve our students in the best way possible? Let me ask this question to Dr. Shahril. How can we harness this energy of innovation?
Thank you for the question. I think the most difficult part, I think that has been mentioned by the other panelists too, is the change of mindset. I think what is happening at the moment is a training ground for the challenge to change the mindset. I think we are now operating in many ways very uncomfortable. So this is like one of like the principles of the how to create an innovative culture is to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So I think at the moment we educators and also other sectors are being challenged to we are being disrupted from our routine, from our regular rhythm, and suddenly we have to find like a new rhythm. And this is actually the mindset of innovation. And I think if we continue to provide opportunities for educators to be to have like the agency to innovate, to have like the agency to try, experiment with new ideas going forward, and to allow in a culture of innovation, failure is not to be punished. Failure is an opportunity to learn. So how can we create like policies where experimentation is allowed and encouraged? And therefore, I think the best way, the best curriculum is role modeling from the adults. So our students, when they see like adults are doing that and try to do that, and they see that as a model to follow, and they can also be inspired. And what's more important is actually for our students to be given the opportunity to experiment new ideas. What Indonesia is going forward with our design of the new curriculum is to provide like 25% of the component of the curriculum for student-led project-based learning. So in a way that they can connect with their communities, in the way that they can also look at what problems that are around them that they can tackle together with their teachers and the community members. And this is an opportunity. I mean, like this was the plan, like the design before the pandemic. I think with the pandemic, with the adoption of the new mindset, comfortable with the uncomfortable, I think we have the momentum going with the enthusiasm for learning. This is like, I think, yes, the blessing in disguise, you know, like, so we have to keep riding the momentum. There's no turning back. When it's the COVID is over, we cannot turn back to the way it used to be. We have to keep moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. Beautiful. Really love this idea of bottom-up innovation and empowering teachers to do micro innovations within their context and to lead the way and to really model you know, experimentation and failing for students. You know, Mr. Vishal Solanki, let me come back to you for a moment. There's a question for you around the 2-year period that you've said would be needed to address the learning deficit brought about by COVID. And can you share what role, if any, do you see for the explicit development of skills as a mechanism to help children recover from the academic deficit caused by the pandemic? I think you're on mute, sir.
In the government across national and state governments, the thinking is how we can ensure continuous and comprehensive evaluation to help bridge this gap, which has been caused by the COVID lockdown. In 6 to 7 months period, we had tried to think out of box and use it as an opportunity to give those skills to children at homes, which otherwise they don't get time for because their schedules are pretty tight. learn academic subjects and so on when they're physically in schools. So this entire 6 to 7 months period was used to give a boost to their creativity, to help them write poems, help them write stories, help them understand dignity of labor even in well-off families, to support their help their parents in the domestic works, to learn a new skill in some sports and so on. So the idea was to ensure each and every child get a few unique skills in this lockdown period. And second question was, how do we now cope up with the inevitable academic loss that has happened in the first half of academic year in 2020? So our idea was to have a reduced curriculum in rest of the academic year, which can be covered through online and offline methods, have different types of evaluation systems in place, again online and offline, to cater to those children who can give their exams or tests online or offline, and then exactly find out where is the gap, and then curtail all the holidays, summer vacations and other vacations, and ensure that this gap is bridged through extra classes and extra mentoring, and then carry it forward to the next year. We have a fundamental right to education between age group of 6 to 14. So whatever loss has happened in this year, children are not retained in their earlier grades. They graduate to the next grade, but this loss is made up through this extra mentoring and coaching in the next year. And as the questioner had put it, different skills of decision making and memory and so on are also being taken care of when we are giving a lot of emphasis on teachers training, because teachers are oxygen of this entire system. Unless you have a very strong commitment and competence in a teacher, you cannot really translate it in 30 or 40 children whom he is going to teach. So we are ensuring a lot of emphasis on teachers training. We have around 8 lakh teachers in Maharashtra. So through online and offline methods, we are trying to help them cope up with this new challenge, to really make up for academic loss and also build those different qualities in our children in next academic year. So we are seeing it as a continuum, and that's how we think we would be able to take care of this.
I love the emphasis on teachers. Teachers are the oxygen of the system. Very powerfully said. The last question will go to both former Minister Paudel and Minister Dipu Moni. We have a very interesting question from the audience, which is, how can we what can we do to set the subcontinent as an example for what is possible in education, and also enhance regional collaboration, both among governments and among communities? Maybe let me start with Minister Dipu Moni. Your thoughts very briefly. We only have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to give you 1 minute per person to share your thoughts on this big question.
Okay, I thoroughly agree with my co-panelist from Maharashtra. Whatever he said, we are actually doing something very similar. And if you're thinking about something special from this subcontinent, I would say that the whole world is now fascinated by all the things that originated in this subcontinent, whether it's yoga, whether it's all the health foods, everything, and meditation, so all these things. So I think that we have, given our history of thousands of years and the civilization in this part of the world, and the richness of our languages, various languages and cultures, and our music, and our talents in every field, whether it's science, technology, literature, everywhere. I think if we put our heads together, then we can showcase some of these basic ideas, and we can, if our children, they learn these and they feel empowered by these ideas, I think that could be a very, very powerful thing from this subcontinent. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautifully said. And like a true Bengali, I love that you have included the emphasis on language and culture and music. Honorable former Minister Thakur Singh Paudel, you get the final word. Tell us, what can we do to set an example from our region in terms of education and community connection? Sir, I think you're on mute.
Thank you very much indeed. Can you hear me now? Yes.
Yes, yes.
I totally agree with the Honorable Education Minister, Her Excellency Dr. Deepu Moni. I think it is a question of rediscovering, reaffirming, and reasserting the great awakenings of our part of the world. Long, long before some of the inventions and discoveries were made possible in other parts of the world, our part of the world was far ahead of the others. In so many fields, our world has been the cradle of great civilizations, great cultures, great inventions and discoveries. In the course of history, somewhere along the line, somewhere along the way, the rains started beating us. We forgot our soul and went all out to borrow somebody else's soul. I think it's important for our part of the world to rediscover and reassert our soul. That will be the greatest contribution to humanity and to the world from our part of the world. Thank you.
Beautifully said. We need to rediscover our soul and rediscover what's already been there for generations in our history. I cannot thank each of you enough. It's been truly a pleasure to moderate this discussion. I wish we had several hours more to continue the many interesting topics that have been raised. And thank you for highlighting the importance of the student voice and the community voice, knowing how much wisdom there is in our communities, if only we can slow down to listen and involve them in the dialogue. Thank you so very much to everyone who's joined and asked questions. If you would like to stay connected with Next Gen Edu, the sign up form is in the chat. Please fill it out. You're all very welcome. And a virtual applause for the Honorable Director General for Teachers and Education Personnel, Dr. Iwan Shahril, the Honorable Education Commissioner of Maharashtra, Mr. Vishal Solanki, the Honorable former Minister of Education, Thakur Paudel, and the Honorable Minister of Education of Bangladesh, Dr. Deepu Moni. Many, many thanks to all four of you for your valuable time and insights.
Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to
Madam.
all the panelists and everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
There is a poll as you're leaving. It would be great if you could complete, and hope to see you in the rest of the sessions in the conference.